Hi everyone. Today I'm going to share with you a personal story of mine that talks about the power of prayer. And this story takes back in 2003. My son was in high school, and during the high school years, he always had lots of his friends come over. It just seemed to be the place to hang out was in our home. But this one particular boy, his name was Albert, he was always at our house, and it felt like he was part of our family. Albert and I grew a bond of sharing, intimate things, whether he was worried about something in school, a girlfriend, and I also shared my mediumship abilities. At that time, I was not using any of my healing abilities. I was just using my mediumship, and he understood it. He was fascinated by it. So we had this bond that we shared, a trust. And it was nice having someone of my son's friends that did believe in what I was doing. So they graduated from high school, and that summer it seemed like the parties were never ending. It was like one celebration after another, and the kids were just living fully, and they knew that this was the last time they were going to be together because many of them were going to go off to college. In fact, my son was going to be leaving in the fall at sometime in the middle of August for the University of Arizona. So he was living life to the fullest. And there was one night when my son was working. It was the night before his 18th birthday. And Albert had texted him. And this was something they always did. They text to see, hey, what's up for the night, or what are we going to do? And Stephen didn't think much about it, but he ended up not texting or replying that night. And so what ended up happening was that evening, Albert was reaching out for help. Stephen didn't know that. And Albert had broken up with a girlfriend that he was dating since 7th grade. Now, this breakup had happened maybe a week before. It's been going on for about a week. And the hardship was getting harder and harder and harder on Albert. He just couldn't let it go. And the reason he couldn't let it go is because his friends around him that were a community of his girlfriend's friends and his friends were saying words that were not true. And I remember him telling me like how much these words were sabotaging who he was as a human being. And I would tell Albert, these words are not true, so don't own them, but also know that the truth will show itself in time. But he didn't like being the bad guy. And that's what he was being looked at as. He was the bad guy. He ended this relationship. He didn't do things right. So the evening that he texted my son for help, it was a cry for help. And it wasn't until the next morning that my son Stephen received the call that Albert tried to commit suicide. Albert took 2 bottles of pills. One was ibuprofen and the other was Percocet. Albert usually leaves early in the morning for work, and he was still laying in bed when his brother had found him. And he said to his brother, because he was still coherent at the time, I need mom, get me help. And then he passed out. His mother got him to the nearest hospital, and they were doing brain scans. They were seeing if he was brain dead. He was in a comatose state. And the word was spreading quickly amongst the kids. By the time my son was going to go visit him at the hospital, Albert had been helicoptered to another hospital because they had found that he was having hemorrhaging in the brain. At that time, the hospital was farther away, it was downtown, and I knew that these kids were not in a condition to drive. So I became the driver and we drove down to this hospital. As we entered the hospital, I could see lots of high school friends. They had the panic, sadness, unknown circumstances on their face. Just these blank, sad faces. The mother was there, the family was there, and a pastor was there. Albert was going to be taken soon to have another CAT scan at that hospital to see their own images, but the mother had witnessed and seen the images that the prior hospital had taken showing these hemorrhaging, and she mentioned to me that she was worried because he was born with this blood clot that could burst at any time, but there wasn't anything that they could do but watch for it. So she worried that this could also be a factor of something that could happen, and really it may take his life. Hours passed, and I could tell there were a group of those kids that just couldn't leave. They felt hopeless. So I gathered them in prayer and to give them peace and knowing that they were doing their part by saying a prayer. Afterwards, the kids were kind of gathered in the corner and the mom was sitting by herself. And I went and put my arm around her and sat next to her. And I said, how about we do a prayer asking for divine intervention to heal Albert? At the time, I really didn't consider myself a healer, but I had this knowing inside that this is what I was supposed to do. It was like I was getting a push. I was getting guidance from Spirit to say, do this. And what do we have to lose? So I asked her, how would I stand behind you? And since you have such a strong bond with your son, I will use you as his proxy. And I will place my hands on your head, and you will close your eyes, sit in prayer, as I pray silently over you for your son. As I had my hands over her head, it wasn't that I felt anything going on in my hands or going into her head. I just felt this sense of peace. I closed my eyes and I could see white light going through. And my intention was that Albert's brain would stop hemorrhaging and that all would become peaceful, healthy, and whole at that moment. So we sat in prayer for maybe 10 minutes. And I remember her asking me, are you sure we should do this right here? Because so many kids are watching. And I said, why not? Why not allow them to witness what is taking place? I had no idea what was going to transpire. I was just opening myself up to be the vessel and the instrument. And I had never done anything like this before. As we waited, the doctors came out to talk to Albert's mom. What we all learned was this CAT scan that was being done at the same time that we were all praying and I was putting my hands on Albert's mom. It showed that there was no hemorrhaging, but it also showed that that one blood clot that was there on his brain for all these years had also disappeared. Everything was gone. I remember feeling such a sigh of relief, like, okay, now we know he's still not out of the woods, but we went so far, the divine God healed something so much bigger than what we knew, or how we humanly could understand. But all we could do was be grateful. She took my hand, she cried. She's like, I don't know what you did, but I can't thank you enough. She said, will you come back tomorrow and go in the room with me? I said, I'm not going to be allowed to go back into the room, because when it's a suicide watch, they're very protective who's going to be able to go into that room. And I'm not family. And she said, yes, you are family. And I will tell them that you're from the church. I said, okay. So we planned on meeting later in that afternoon. So that evening, we went home with hope. Hope that we didn't have when we entered that hospital. We could rest, we could be at ease, we could be at comfort, we could have peace in knowing that everything's being orchestrated from behind the scenes. The next day, I went by myself, and I was greeted by Albert's mom, and we walked into Albert's room. Now, Albert's arms were tied down to his bed, and that was hard for me to see, as I could cry today just thinking of it. The reason for that is because of the amount of medicine that he took, or the pills that he took, it could cause him to thrash, and they didn't want him to get hurt or hurt himself. So that's why his arms had to be tied down. I also saw that he had been intubated and was helping him breathe. We stood on opposite ends of the bed. I was on his right side, and she was on his left. And we held hands, and we placed our other hand that was free on Albert's body. At that moment, I looked next to Albert's mom, and I could see Albert's grandmother standing next to her, which would have been her mother. And it made her feel so happy knowing she was there, because Albert was very close to this grandmother. I was then told, something just flashed into my mind. And it was so far-fetched, but I knew I had to say it. But I had to trust it, but I really didn't know, could this really happen? And what happened was, I was told, it was 3 o'clock at the time. I said, look at the clock, it's 3 o'clock. In 15 minutes, Albert's going to wake up, because he was in a comatose state, and you're going to need to get the doctors. And you're going to need to get them quick, because if you don't, he's going to be throwing up, and he could gag where he could die. So minute by minute, we were watching that clock. And I knew that Albert still wasn't out of the woods, because doctors were watching his kidneys to see if the kidneys were going to continue to function because of the amount of medicine he took. But this was the next stage. We watched minute by minute, and I can tell you, my heart was racing. What did I just say? What if this doesn't happen? And then I had to stop saying what if, and I had to just say it will happen, and it's going to happen. Just watch the time. It's like you could hear the clock ticking, tick, 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 and watching minute by minute go by. And then at 3:15, Albert opened his eyes, and he began to choke. That his mom ran out of that room so quickly, grabbed those doctors. They quickly came into the room, took this out of his throat. And when that was all done, I said, okay, I think I need to leave the room. I said to the nurse, because there's so much chaos and things going on, I don't want to disturb anything. And the doctor turned around and looked at me and said, no, I think you need to stay here, because you seem to know what's going on better than we do. I was like shocked at that statement. He must have heard us. speaking what was going to happen. They must have heard it in the hallway, or maybe a nurse heard us. I don't know, but those words were pretty profound to me. So I stayed. And I was able to witness Albert and his mom reunite, and the smiles on their face, and the joy and the relief, and that all was going to be okay. Albert did get his kidneys checked, and everything was fine. He walked out of that hospital a few days later being completely healthy and whole, as if this never happened. I share this story because I didn't consider myself a healer. I didn't consider myself an instrument or a vessel. I just believed in the power of prayer. So I share this story with you because we all have this within us. We have this ability. I had such a strong will in me that I wanted this to be done. I trusted it could be done. I trusted in God's miracles, his work, his healings. I knew those existed. I just didn't know that it could exist through me. But I listened to my gut, my intuition. I listened to my guidance from my guides, the angels, what I was hearing, what I was feeling in the push. And I just did it with pure faith and pure love. I knew that my boys needed each other. I didn't know what my son would do without his best friend. His life would have forever changed. He may not have ever went down to college. I don't know if he could have mentally been able to go to school if something like this would have turned with a different outcome. So I say to you, continue to pray. Trust in the power of prayer, for you may be used as an instrument one day. And trust the prayers that you send out there. Sometimes I get questions like, can we pray? Can you heal someone that maybe doesn't want it? Mm-hmm. Your loving intention is sending out a loving prayer that they be at ease, comfort, that they have an awareness with what's ever coming into their life, and that things change for the better for them. When we do things with a pure intention of love and light, don't ever question, just do. So with that, thank you for listening to this story. And I have this story I actually placed in my very first book that I ever wrote, called Believe Beyond Seeing. I don't know if you can see this. Let me see. It's disappearing. Believe Beyond Seeing. You can get this on Amazon. But the full story is in here, and along with many more of my mediumships and how I became a medium. And Dr. Gary Schwartz actually wrote the foreword to this, and how I was studied at the Veritas Lab, and now how I am a certified research medium with the Windbridge Institute. So if you want to learn more about me, you can go to my website at www.goldenmiracles.com. Please sign up for my newsletter. I will have upcoming events that I post on there. Also on my website, you can access my Facebook page. I'd love you to join and become one of my friends. And there I post more testimonials, more stories. But also, I have a podcast that is free for you to listen to. It's called Spirit Chat. And it's just exactly that. We have topics that Valerie and I speak about on this podcast that are uplifting conversations, but they're led by Spirit. And sometimes Spirit will speak right through and go, uh-oh, they're asking us to talk about this. And it becomes humorous, it becomes uplifting, and please join us it might uplift your day as well. With that, I look forward to the next time that we gather and I share more stories of the voice of healing. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. God bless. Have a wonderful day.